The fog clung to Port Blossom like a damp shroud, muffling the usual sounds of the harbour and the distant cry of gulls. It was a town built on secrets whispered between the sea and the shore, a place where everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. I, Elara Vance, a librarian in my mid-40s, had moved here with my teenage daughter Maya, seeking the quiet solitude the coast promised after a messy divorce. For 3 years, Port Blossom had delivered. Its rhythm as predictable as the tide, its people seemingly as open as the wide Pacific sky. My closest connection, my anchor in this new place, was my neighbour, Chloe Abernathy. Chloe lived next door with her husband Liam. Their house, a sprawling craftsman with manicured gardens, was the epitome of coastal prosperity. Liam was the picture of charming success. Handsome, always impeccably dressed, with a smile that could disarm the most hardened cynic. He travelled often for his import-export business, which Chloe vaguely described as dealing in high-end goods. Chloe, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of local activity. PTA president, historical society member, queen of the town bake sale. She was vibrant, funny, and had welcomed Maya and me with open arms. She felt like the sister I never had, a confidant in a world I was still navigating. We shared coffee on her porch overlooking the misty bay, swapped gardening tips, and commiserated about teenage angst. Maya, initially withdrawn, had even started to open up, finding a semblance of stability in our little corner of Port Blossom. My life had settled into a comfortable routine, the quiet hum of the library, Maya's school schedule, and evenings spent reading or walking the beach, punctuated by shared meals or conversations with Chloe. It wasn't exciting, but it was safe, predictable, and exactly what I needed. I had built this fragile peace brick by painstaking brick. The first crack appeared not as a dramatic fissure, but a hairline fracture. Chloe had volunteered us, without asking, to organise the entire town's annual book fair. It wasn't the task itself, I loved books, but the casual way she'd announced it at a town council meeting, taking full credit for the idea, and then later brushed off my hesitant protest with a breezy, "Oh, you won't mind, you're so good at this sort of thing." It was a small thing, a thoughtless oversight perhaps, but it stung. It felt like a tiny betrayal of the trust I placed in her, a reminder that maybe our friendship wasn't as solid as I believed. That same week, late one Tuesday night, a persistent, low rumble woke me. I peered out my bedroom window, which faced the Abernathy's property. A large, unmarked truck was backed up to the side door of their detached garage, a structure Liam usually kept locked tight and out of sight behind a high hedge. 2 figures, bulky in the dim light filtering through the fog, were quickly unloading several large, dark crates. They weren't moving them with the casual ease of someone handling ordinary goods. There was an urgency, a strained effort as they manoeuvred the heavy boxes. The air, already thick with the smell of salt and damp earth, seemed to carry a faint, unusual odour I couldn't place. The whole scene felt clandestine, wrong. Liam himself emerged from the garage, directing the men with sharp, hushed gestures. His usual charming smile was gone, replaced by a taut, anxious expression I'd never seen. The truck left as quietly as it arrived, melting back into the fog. It was just a late delivery, I told myself, trying to dismiss the unease churning in my stomach. Liam's in import-export, after all. But combined with the lingering sting of Chloe's thoughtlessness, the image of those heavy crates, and Liam's strained face lodged themselves in my mind. The quiet predictability of Port Blossom suddenly felt fragile, and the friendly facade next door seemed to flicker in the misty night. Something was off. And for a librarian who dealt in facts and sought understanding, off was a mystery I couldn't ignore. The feeling lingered, a persistent itch under my skin. It wasn't just the late-night delivery. It was the combination of that unsettling sight and the small, sharp pain of Chloe's casual disregard. My librarian's mind, trained to categorize, cross-reference, and find patterns in chaos, couldn't let it go. I started subtly. At the library, during quiet moments between helping patrons find books on local history or checking out the latest bestsellers, I logged onto the public databases. Liam Abernathy. Abernathy Imports and Exports. Initial searches yielded little. A registered business in Portland, a standard website showcasing generic-looking goods, furniture, textiles, decorative items. Nothing suspicious on the surface. But the address for the business registration was indeed a P.O. box in a strip mall. not a physical office or warehouse. That struck me as slightly unusual for a company dealing in large cargo. I noted the date of incorporation, relatively recent, about 5 years ago, around the time they moved to Port Blossom. I started paying closer attention to the Abernathy house, not in a nosy neighbour way, but with a quiet, almost academic observation. I noticed that the large garage doors were rarely opened. Deliveries, when they happened during the day, were usually small vans dropping off packages at the front door, typical online shopping. The heavy-duty truck from that night never reappeared openly. I also noticed Liam's travel schedule seemed erratic. He'd be gone for days, sometimes a week, then back for just a day or two before leaving again. Chloe always had a breezy explanation, but there was a subtle tension in her whenever Liam was away, a forced cheerfulness that hadn't registered before. My research expanded. I started looking into import-export regulations, types of cargo that might require unusual handling, and common methods of smuggling into coastal towns. My browser history became a strange mix of historical fiction, teenage reading lists, and articles on maritime law and customs enforcement. I felt a thrill, a low thrum of adrenaline that was completely alien to my usual quiet life. It was like piecing together a complex puzzle, each small fact a potential clue. Then I found something more concrete. Searching local news archives, I found a brief article from a few years back about a small fishing boat seized near Port Blossom. It was suspected of transporting illegal goods, but the cargo was never specified, and the case seemed to have gone cold. The date of the seizure was roughly around the time Liam's business was incorporated. Probably just a coincidence, I told myself. But the chill returned. The subtle threats began almost imperceptibly. I received an email at my personal account. The subject line was just a string of numbers, and the body contained only a single, blurry photo of my house taken from the street. No message, no sender name. It was unsettling, but I dismissed it as spam or a wrong address. A few days later, I found a small, deep scratch etched into the paintwork of my car door, too deliberate to be accidental. It wasn't enough to report, but it felt like a warning. I started double-checking the locks on my doors and windows, a habit I hadn't had since living alone after my divorce. Maya noticed my unease. "Mom, are you okay? You seem jumpy." "Just tired, honey," I'd say, forcing a smile. I didn't want to scare her. She needed stability, not the knowledge that our neighbours, the people she saw as friendly and safe, might be involved in something dangerous. My investigation became something I did in secret, late at night after Maya was asleep, the glow of my laptop the only light in the quiet house. The initial sting of Chloe's betrayal had morphed into a cold, hard resolve. Something wasn't right next door, and I had to know what it was, not just for my own peace of mind, but for our safety. The puzzle was becoming darker, and I was starting to suspect the pieces weren't just about import-export, but something far more sinister hidden behind the charming smiles and manicured lawns of Port Blossom. The subtle threats weren't subtle for long. One morning, I found a dead seabird on my doorstep, its neck twisted at an unnatural angle. It was placed deliberately, undeniably a message. My stomach clenched with fear, but a cold anger began to simmer beneath it. This wasn't just about uncovering a secret anymore. It was personal. They knew I was looking. I tried talking to Chloe again, determined to get some truth, or at least understand her role in this. I invited her over for coffee, trying to keep my voice casual. "Chloe," I started, carefully, "I wanted to ask you about Liam's business. I've been doing some research for a library project, and I came across some things that, well, they seemed a little unusual." Her eyes, usually so warm, flickered with something I couldn't read. Fear? Defensiveness? "Unusual? What do you mean, Alara?" Her voice was tight. "Just some discrepancies in the public records, the P.O. box address, that sort of thing," I lied, minimizing my actual findings. "And I've noticed some strange deliveries late at night." The warmth vanished completely. Her face hardened. "Alara, you need to stop poking around in things that don't concern you." "But you're my friend, Chloe. If something is wrong, if Liam is involved in something illegal, it could affect you. It could affect us." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, completely devoid of her usual charm. "You don't know anything. Liam's business is complicated, but it's safe, as long as no one interferes. Do you understand?" The implication hung heavy in the air. It wasn't a plea for understanding, it was a threat. My friend, my anchor in this town, was not only aware of Liam's activities, but was actively complicit, protecting him, and by extension, threatening me. The betrayal was a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. The friendship I had cherished, the trust I had placed, was a complete facade. Chloe Abernathy, the bake sale queen, was part of this hidden darkness next door. "Chloe," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "are you okay? Is Liam forcing you into this?" She scoffed, a bitter sound. "Don't be naive, Alara. This is our life. A good life. It requires discretion and loyalty. Don't mistake kindness for weakness. You came here for peace, didn't you? Don't ruin it." She stood up abruptly. "I think you should leave now, and I suggest you forget everything you think you've seen or found." She walked out, leaving me alone in my living room, the silence amplifying the ringing in my ears. The friendship was over, shattered by the ugly truth. The danger was real, and it was right next door. I knew I had to go to the police, but my previous attempt with Sheriff Brody had left me hesitant. He was a decent man, by all accounts, but busy, probably dealing with the usual small-town issues, a few bar fights, stolen fishing gear, teenagers joyriding. How could I walk in and tell him my charming neighbour, the pillar of the community's husband, was a criminal mastermind based on blurry photos, late-night noises, and a gut feeling? He needed proof. Irrefutable, undeniable proof. The isolation was suffocating. I couldn't talk to Maya, couldn't risk putting her in more danger. My only friend in town was now an adversary. I was a librarian, not a detective, not a hero. My strengths were quiet research, not confronting criminals. Fear gnawed at me constantly, a cold knot in my stomach. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window, sent a jolt of panic through me. But beneath the fear was a growing resolve. Liam Abernathy had shattered my peace and threatened my daughter. He had used my friend as a shield. He was operating this hidden darkness right under the nose of our quiet town. I wouldn't let him get away with it. If Sheriff Brody needed proof, I would find it myself. The library, my sanctuary, would become my war room. I would use every resource at my disposal to expose him. My investigation intensified, fueled by fear and a burning need for justice. I spent hours at the library after closing, the only sound the hum of the computers and the distant foghorns. I delved into more specialized databases, looking for shipping manifests, customs records, anything related to Port Blossom Harbor and Liam's business name. I researched known smuggling routes along the Oregon coast. My knowledge of local history, usually a source of comfort, now became a tool to understand potential hidden coves or forgotten docks that could be used for illicit transfers. I found a pattern. Liam's business trips often coincided with the arrival of certain smaller cargo ships in the region, ships with obscure registrations or histories of docking in less regulated ports. I cross-referenced these with local harbour traffic logs, publicly available information that few people paid attention to. There were gaps, discrepancies, boats listed as arriving but not clearing customs properly, or docking at unusual times or locations further down the coast, potentially transferring goods to smaller vessels before entering Port Blossom. The threats escalated in parallel. Maya's school bag was rifled through while she was at practice. Nothing was taken, but her personal items were scattered, a clear message. I started driving her to and from school myself, my eyes constantly scanning the rearview mirror. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone trying the handle on my back door. I froze, heart pounding, clutching the phone in my hand, ready to call 911. The sound stopped, and I heard footsteps retreating. They weren't trying to break in. They were reminding me they could. I bought a cheap security camera system and installed it myself, positioning cameras to cover the front and back doors and the view towards the Abernathy's garage. The grainy footage was rarely illuminating, mostly just fog and the occasional deer, but it gave me a small sense of control. I knew Liam was smart, covering his tracks. His import-export business was likely a perfect cover for high-value, easily transportable items, not bulky furniture, but perhaps stolen art, rare artifacts, or even illegal wildlife products. Something that could be moved quietly and command a high price. The faint, unusual smell I'd noticed that first night haunted me. Was it something specific related to the cargo? My research led me to a closed-down cannery on the outskirts of town, a relic of Port Blossom's past, now overgrown and largely forgotten. Shipping records from decades ago showed it had its own private dock, deep enough for smaller vessels even at low tide. It wasn't visible from the main harbour. Could this be where the transfers were happening? I needed to see it, to confirm my suspicion. It was a reckless thought, completely against my nature. But the image of Maya's school bag, the dead bird, the rattling doorknob, they pushed me. Fear was still there, a constant companion, but it was now mixed with a fierce, protective rage. I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't let them scare me into silence while they operated their criminal enterprise next door and threatened my daughter. I planned meticulously. I chose a night when Liam's travel schedule indicated he was due back in town, increasing the likelihood of activity. I checked the tide charts. I borrowed a sturdy flashlight from the library's maintenance closet and bought a cheap disposable phone. I didn't tell Maya, just said I had some late work. Lying to her felt awful, but the truth was too dangerous. Under the cover of the persistent coastal fog, I drove my old sedan towards the edge of town, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The road to the cannery was barely more than a muddy track, shrouded by dripping trees. I parked a quarter-mile away and continued on foot, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under my worn boots and the distant rhythmic crash of waves. The air was cold and damp, carrying the strong smell of salt and decay from the abandoned building. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive quiet. I was stepping into the unknown, into the darkness that had been hiding next door, and I had no idea what I would find. The abandoned cannery loomed ahead, a skeletal structure against the misty sky. Its broken windows looked like vacant eyes, and the air here was even heavier with the scent of decay and something else. Something metallic and oily, mingling with the salt. I crept closer, using the dense undergrowth for cover. My flashlight beam was a thin, nervous finger cutting through the gloom. As I neared the dock, I heard faint sounds, hushed voices, the scrape of heavy objects, the gentle lap of water against wood. My breath hitched. They were here. Peeking through a gap in the rotted wooden fence, I saw them. A small, dark boat was tied to the crumbling dock. Several figures were moving crates, the same kind I'd seen that first night, from the boat onto the dock, then towards a large sliding door on the side of the cannery. And there, directing them, was Liam Abernathy. He wasn't wearing his usual sharp clothes. He was in dark, practical gear, his face grim and focused under the beam of a powerful flashlight held by one of the men. I fumbled for the disposable phone in my pocket, my fingers cold and clumsy. I needed to call Sheriff Brody now, tell him exactly where they were, what they were doing. But I hesitated. What if they saw me? What if the phone signal was bad out here? What if the sheriff still wasn't convinced and they got away before he arrived? I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. Taking a shaky breath, I raised the phone, switching it to camera mode. The quality was poor in the low light, but maybe, just maybe, I could get a photo, a video clip, something that showed the boat, the crates, Liam's face. My hands trembled as I zoomed in, trying to get a steady shot. That's when I heard a twig snap behind me. My blood ran cold. I spun around, dropping the phone. A large figure was emerging from the trees, silhouetted against the slightly less dark sky. Not Liam, one of his associates? Well, a rough voice drawled. Look what we have here. Lost, little lady? I stumbled backward, heart leaping into my throat. Stay away from me. He chuckled, a low, unpleasant sound. Can't have you seeing things you shouldn't, now can we? He advanced slowly. Panic seized me. I wasn't a fighter. I was a librarian. But I had to think. I had to get away. My eyes darted around, searching for an escape route. The fence was old, maybe weak enough to break through. Before I could react, another figure appeared from the darkness, moving with surprising speed. Not from the trees, but from the side of the cannery. It was Chloe. Get away from her, she yelled, her voice sharp. The man paused, surprised. Chloe? What the hell are you doing here? Liam said you were staying home. I followed him, she said, stepping forward, putting herself between me and the man. I knew he was doing something tonight. I just didn't know. I didn't know you'd be here, Alara. Her face in the dim light was a mask of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, maybe even a flicker of regret. Chloe, move, the man growled, taking another step towards us. No, she shouted. Leave her alone. She doesn't know anything. She knows enough to be out here, he retorted. Liam's not going to be happy about this. Move, or you're going to get hurt too. From the dock, Liam's voice cut through the air. What's going on? Chloe, what are you doing? He started walking towards us, his face a thundercloud. Chloe glanced back at me, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. Run, Elara! Go! The man lunged. Chloe shoved him hard, catching him off balance. He stumbled back with an angry curse. You stupid bitch! This was my chance. Adrenaline surged through me. I turned and ran, scrambling back towards the muddy track, not daring to look back. The sounds of shouting and a brief scuffle faded behind me as I burst through the trees, gasping for air, my legs pumping, fueled by sheer terror. I didn't stop until I reached my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them in the ignition. I sped away, leaving the dark secrets of the cannery behind, my mind reeling. Chloe. She had been involved, knew about it, yet she had just saved me. Why? What was her game? The questions swirled in my head, but one thing was terrifyingly clear. I was deep in something far more dangerous than I had imagined, and my life and Maya's were on the line. I had to get help. Real help. Back in the relative safety of my quiet house, the adrenaline crash left me trembling and nauseous. I made sure Maya was asleep, then sat in the dark living room, replaying the terrifying scene at the cannery. Chloe's face, her desperate plea for me to run. It didn't fit the image of the complicit wife. Had she been trying to protect me? Or was it a twisted way of ensuring I stayed silent by making me indebted to her? I didn't know. The layers of deception were thicker than the Port Blossom fog. I retrieved the disposable phone. It had landed face down and the screen was cracked, but miraculously, the camera app was still open. I scrolled through the recent photos. Most were blurry, useless shots of the ground as I ran. But there were a few taken just before I dropped it. Distant, shaky images of the boat, the crates, and one that, despite the poor quality, clearly showed Liam's face illuminated by the flashlight beam as he directed his men. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. It was more than just my word against his. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. Skeptical or not, Sheriff Brody was my only hope. I called the non-emergency line for the Port Blossom Sheriff's Department. The dispatcher sounded tired. Port Blossom Sheriff's Department, how can I help you? My name is Elara Vance, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to speak to Sheriff Brody. It's urgent. It's about the Abernathys. Liam Abernathy. There was a pause. Can you tell me what this is regarding, ma'am? It's about illegal activity. Smuggling. I have evidence. That got her attention. Please hold for the sheriff. Sheriff Brody's voice, when he finally came on the line, was weary but alert. Elara Vance, I remember you. What's this about Liam Abernathy and smuggling? I took a deep breath and recounted everything. The late-night deliveries, my research, the inconsistencies, the threats, the dead bird, the attempt at my door, and finally what I had witnessed at the abandoned cannery tonight. I described the boat, the crates, Liam, his associate, and Chloe's unexpected appearance. He listened patiently, asking brief, pointed questions. When I finished, the silence stretched, heavy and expectant. Miss Vance, he said finally, his tone serious, this is a very serious accusation. Liam Abernathy is a respected businessman in this town. Are you absolutely certain about what you saw? Yes, Sheriff, absolutely certain. I saw the boat, the crates, I saw Liam. And I have photos, poor quality, but they show him there. Photos taken with the disposable phone you mentioned? Yes. All right, he said. This changes things. It's still not a slam dunk, but it's enough for me to take a closer look. Where are you now? At my house. Is it safe for you to be there? I don't know, I admitted. They know I was out there. They know I saw them. Okay, don't do anything. Don't open the door for anyone. I'll send a unit to your location immediately. Stay on the phone with the dispatcher until they arrive. And Miss Vance, stay away from the windows. His words sent a fresh wave of fear through me. He believed me enough to send a unit, but he also thought I might be in immediate danger. I hung up with him and stayed on the line with the dispatcher, my eyes scanning the dark street outside my windows, every shadow seeming to lengthen and twist into something menacing. Maya was asleep upstairs, oblivious. I had to protect her. I had crossed a line tonight, stepping out of my quiet life and into the path of something dangerous. There was no going back. Current part characters 3,380, total characters 1,266. 2 deputies arrived within 15 minutes, their patrol car pulling silently into my driveway. Their presence was a small comfort, a solid barrier against the unseen threats lurking in the fog. I showed them the cracked phone with the blurry photos. They examined them, their expressions unreadable, but I could see the slight shift in their demeanour. It wasn't just a hysterical neighbour anymore. There was something here. Sheriff Brody arrived shortly after, his face grim. He looked at the photos, then at me. "It's not much to go on, Miss Vance, but it's enough for me to get the ball rolling. We'll start discreetly. I'll have some of my men check out that old cannery site in the morning. We'll also start looking into Abernathy's business more thoroughly, try to get warrants to access his records if we can find probable cause." "What about Liam? And Chloe? They know I saw them," I pressed. "For now, we'll keep an eye on their place," Brody said. "We can't just arrest them based on these photos and your testimony. We need more. But if they make any moves against you, call us immediately. We'll have patrols circulating in the area. And Miss Vance, keep this to yourself. Don't talk to anyone about this, especially not your daughter for now. The fewer people who know, the safer you are." He was right. I couldn't tell Maya. The burden of this secret, the danger we were in, felt crushing. The deputies stayed outside for the rest of the night, their car a silent, watchful presence. I barely slept, jumping at every sound. The next day was a blur of forced normalcy. I went to work at the library, interacting with patrons, recommending books, all while a knot of terror tightened in my stomach. I saw Chloe at the post office during my lunch break. Our eyes met for a split second. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. Was it fear? Defiance? She quickly looked away and hurried out. The silence between us was louder than any accusation. Sheriff Brody called me later that afternoon. "We checked the cannery site," he reported. "Found some tyre tracks, boot prints, marks on the dock consistent with heavy crates being moved. No boat, no cargo. They cleaned it up. But we found something else, a small metal box hidden under some loose floorboards inside the cannery. It was empty, but it had residue inside. Preliminary tests suggest it might be related to smuggling of high-value, potentially illegal items. Could be anything from stolen antiquities to rare animal products. We're sending it to the state lab for analysis. It's circumstantial, but it backs up your story." "What about Liam?" I asked. "He's been questioned, played dumb, of course, said he was out of town on business. Chloe backed up his alibi. We can't hold them, not yet, but we're building a case." My financial guys are digging into his business records, looking for anything suspicious. This kind of operation leaves a paper trail, even if he thinks he's covered it. Days turned into a week. The tension was constant. A wire pulled taut. The subtle threats stopped, but the silence felt more menacing than the vandalism. It felt like they were waiting, watching. The patrols were still in the area, a visible deterrent, but I knew they couldn't be here constantly. I felt like a target, exposed and vulnerable. Then, a breakthrough from an unexpected source. An old fisherman, a regular at the library who often came in to read the nautical charts, mentioned seeing a familiar boat, the Sea Serpent, a small, fast trawler known for fishing far offshore, docking at the main harbour at an unusually late hour a few nights ago. He said it looked like they were offloading something heavy, but he didn't think much of it at the time. The date he mentioned matched one of the dates I had flagged in my research when Liam was supposedly out of town and a suspicious cargo ship was in the region. I called Sheriff Brody immediately. "The Sea Serpent," I told him. "Check its recent movements, and check the harbour security footage for that night, if there is any. I think they've been using the main harbour too when they think no one's watching." Brody promised to look into it. The waiting was agonizing. I felt like I had handed him pieces of a puzzle, but I didn't know if he could put them together in time. The weight of knowing, of being the only one who saw the truth behind the Abernathy's perfect facade, was immense. I just hoped my efforts wouldn't be in vain, and that the peace we sought in Port Blossom wasn't irrevocably shattered. We cross-referenced the fisherman's sighting with harbour logs and found discrepancies. We pulled the security footage from that night. It's grainy, but it shows the Sea Serpent docking and offloading several large crates. And guess who was there? Liam Abernathy. My heart leaped. You have him? Not yet, Brody said. He's not at his house. Neither is Chloe. We've got units looking for them. This footage, combined with the residue from the cannery and your testimony, gives us enough for a warrant. We're going to search their house, their garage, the cannery again. We think they might have been storing the goods, or at least some of them, closer than we thought. What about Maya? I asked, the fear for my daughter returning with full force. Is she at school? Yes. Good. She's safest there right now. We'll keep an eye on the school, and I'm sending a deputy to your house. Don't leave. Don't open the door for anyone but law enforcement. The next few hours were a blur of anxiety. A deputy sat in a patrol car outside my house. I paced, watching the clock, waiting for news. Every time my phone rang, I jumped. Finally, Sheriff Brody called again. His voice was grim. We found it, Miss Vance, in a hidden compartment under the floor of their garage. Crates, full of stolen art. Priceless pieces, missing for years from museums across the country. Looks like Abernathy was the fence, using his import-export business to move them internationally. This is big, much bigger than we initially thought. And Liam and Chloe? Still no sign of them, he said. They must have gotten spooked. Maybe Chloe saw you talking to me, or they realized we were closing in. They're on the run. We've put out an alert. They won't get far. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by exhaustion. It was over. The secret was out. The danger, for now, seemed to have passed. But the peace I had sought in Port Blossom felt irrevocably broken. The charming neighbours, the symbol of my new, stable life, were criminals. My closest friend was a deceiver. The town itself, once a haven, now felt tainted, a place where darkness could hide in plain sight. Days turned into a week. Liam and Chloe Abernathy were apprehended trying to cross the border into Canada. The news rocked Port Blossom. The front page of the local paper, usually filled with town council meetings and bake sale results, was dominated by headlines about the Port Blossom smuggling ring and photos of the Abernathys being led away in handcuffs. The community was in shock, buzzing with gossip and disbelief. How could they not have known? Sheriff Brody visited me at the library. "You did good work, Elara," he said, leaning against the counter. "You saw what no one else did. You didn't give up, even when you were scared. You're a good investigator." "I just wanted to protect my daughter," I said softly. And I couldn't stand the lie anymore. The idea that they were just next door, living their perfect life built on crime and deception. "That takes courage," he said, his gaze steady. "More than you think." He told me Chloe had claimed she was unaware of the full extent of Liam's operation, but evidence suggested she was at least complicit in handling the logistics and finances. Her fate would be decided in court. Liam was facing multiple federal charges. Life slowly began to return to a new kind of normal. The Abernathy house stood empty next door, a stark, silent monument to the secrets it had held. Maya was safe, though shaken by the events. I had to explain some of it to her, enough for her to understand the danger we had been in and why I had been so secretive. She was scared, but also seemed to understand, her bond with me deepening through the shared ordeal. The quiet of the library no longer felt like an escape from life, but a place of strength, a repository of knowledge that had empowered me. I was still Elara Vance, the librarian, but I was also someone who had faced down fear and exposed a hidden darkness. The experience had changed me. It had stripped away my naive belief in the surface appearance of things and forced me to confront my own resilience. Port Blossom was still my home, but I saw it differently now. Not just a peaceful coastal town, but a place with layers, where secrets could hide, and where ordinary people might be called upon to do extraordinary things. The fog still rolled in from the ocean, but it no longer felt like it was hiding something sinister. It was just fog. The real darkness had been brought to light, thanks to a librarian who dared to look closer. The process of rebuilding trust, both in my community and in myself, would be long. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a cautious sense of hope. The future was uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face it, one page, one day at a time. Months passed. The seasons shifted in Port Blossom, the misty greens of spring giving way to the brighter, sharper light of summer. The Abernathy house remained empty, a constant reminder of the upheaval. Liam Abernathy was sentenced to a lengthy prison term for smuggling and related charges. Chloe received a lighter sentence, pleading guilty to accessory charges, acknowledging her role in managing the finances and providing cover for Liam's activities, though still claiming partial ignorance of the full scale. Her fate served as a cautionary tale in town, a stark example of how proximity to crime, even through a spouse, could unravel a life. The shock in Port Blossom slowly subsided, replaced by a cautious return to normalcy. People still whispered about the Abernethys and the hidden art, but the initial frenzy faded. Sheriff Brodie became something of a local hero, though he always credited a concerned citizen for the initial lead. My life with Maya settled into a new routine. We were closer than ever. The fear had forged a stronger bond between us. She was doing well in school, starting to make more friends, finding her place in the town. I was still the librarian, and I found a new sense of purpose in my work, organizing workshops on online safety and media literacy, helping people navigate the complexities of information in a world where appearances could be deceiving. One sunny afternoon, Sheriff Brodie stopped by the library again. He wasn't in uniform, just casual clothes. "Alara," he said, with a rare smile, "I wanted to thank you again. That case, it opened up a lot of doors, led us to other connections, other potential operations. You really did a service to the state." "I'm just glad it's over," I replied, returning his smile. "Me too," he said. He paused, looking out the window at the boats in the harbour. "Listen, I know this is out of the blue and probably outside your comfort zone, but have you ever thought about doing something else? Something that uses that sharp mind of yours, your eye for detail, your ability to piece things together?" I raised an eyebrow. "Like what, Sheriff? Becoming a private investigator?" He chuckled. "Something like that. The department is looking to expand. We're getting more state funding after the Abernathy case highlighted the need for more resources in coastal towns. We're setting up a small intelligence unit, research, analysis, digging into records, finding patterns, things you're clearly very good at. It would be civilian, mostly office-based, but working closely with us. It would be a different kind of quiet." I was stunned. Me? Working with the sheriff's department? It was so far removed from my life among books. But as I looked at him, I thought about the fear, the investigation, the thrill of uncovering the truth, the satisfaction of seeing justice done. It wasn't just about protecting Maya. It was about contributing, about using my skills to make sure the hidden darkness didn't thrive. I don't know, Sheriff," I said slowly. "It's unexpected." "Think about it," he said. "It's a chance to use what you learned, what you're good at, for something important. And it pays better than the library," he added with a wink. He left, leaving me with a pamphlet about the new unit and a head full of possibilities. The quiet life I had sought had been disrupted in the most dramatic way, but perhaps, in the aftermath, a new path was opening, one I never would have considered before. The librarian, the quiet observer, had found her voice, and maybe, just maybe, her real story was just beginning. The Abernathy house next door was empty, but my own house, my own life, was no longer defined by the quiet, the fear, or the betrayal. It was defined by resilience, courage, and the unexpected turns life could take, even in a small town like Port Blossom. The offer from Sheriff Brodie was a constant hum in the background of my thoughts over the next few weeks. It was a radical departure from the life I had envisioned, the quiet, predictable existence I had craved after the turbulence of my divorce. My days at the library felt different now. I still loved the smell of old paper and the hushed atmosphere, but I found myself looking at the databases differently, seeing potential connections, hidden trails of information. I talked to Maya about it. I explained the job wasn't dangerous police work, but more like being a research assistant for the sheriff's department, helping them find information that could solve cases. She was hesitant at first, worried it would put me back in harm's way, but she also saw the spark in my eyes when I talked about the investigative aspect. "It sounds like you'd be good at it, Mom," she said finally. "You were like a detective already, finding out about Mr. Abernathy." Her approval meant everything. I met with Sheriff Brodie again, this time at his office. He introduced me to the small team he was putting together. A retired accountant with a knack for following money trails, a young tech expert who could navigate the digital world, and me, the librarian, tasked with digging through public records, historical documents, and online archives, connecting disparate pieces of information. The unit was tentatively called the Coastal Watch Initiative. "We need people who can see the patterns others miss, Ilara," Brody said. "People who understand that sometimes the biggest secrets are hidden in plain sight, buried in boring documents or overlooked details. Your work on the Abernathy case proved you have that." I accepted the position. It felt like stepping off a cliff, leaving the comfortable, familiar world of books for the unpredictable realm of hidden crime. My last day at the library was bittersweet. My colleagues wished me well, surprised but supportive of my new path. My first few weeks with the Coastal Watch Initiative were a steep learning curve. The language of law enforcement was different. The stakes were higher, but the core skill was the same as my library work: finding information, verifying sources, connecting dots. I worked on cases involving illegal fishing, environmental violations, and even a cold case of a missing person that might be linked to organized crime activity along the coast. It was challenging, demanding, and strangely exhilarating. I was using my quiet skills to make a real, tangible difference. The empty house next door was eventually sold. A young family moved in. Their laughter and the sound